Is this thing working? Give me some sound over here.
Yeah.
The Out of Bounds Show is powered by the award-winning golf courses at Dancing Rabbit Golf Club in Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Good morning. Welcome in. Your SEC Insider Hit is driven by your next Ram truck, Jeep Grand Cherokee or Jeep Wrangler, Mac Hike in Flowwood, MacHikeFlowwood.com, MacHikeFlowwood.com. That's where you want to go to get your next pre-owned SUV, truck, or Jeep, including a Ram truck, pre-owned or new. Well, it's baseball season, and people are ready to party in Starkville and Oxford. And we're coming off an interesting year. 2 years. Mississippi State won it 2 years ago. Ole Miss counters, wins it last year. Bianco was fired in April, national champion in June. One of the most, insane stories I've ever covered, considering we've covered Mike since 2003. And Lamonis and that crew had a really, really bad year, and they can't do it again. I thought I was going to lead with Ole Miss with Aaron Fitt, D1 baseball, college baseball insider. But now that the coaches poll dropped and the coaches have basically said, you're not good, we're going to start with Mississippi State baseball because in Starkville, you can't go back-to-back years where you miss the postseason. So we welcome in Aaron Fitt on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Aaron Fitt, good morning. Welcome in.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Aaron, let's start with Mississippi State. They were picked 7th by the coaches. And so you have been through Starkville. You know about this roster. Do you see this as a postseason team, or do you think that they're in jeopardy of missing another postseason?
Yeah, I like this roster, and it's so hard to pick the SEC, because the West in particular, because you got every one of those teams, is a postseason caliber team. I mean, somebody's got to finish 6th and 7th, and like in our case, I think we had Mississippi State and Auburn 6 and 7 in that order, and we still had them both picked to make a regional. That's how strong that division is. I just don't know who they could leapfrog when you look at the teams ahead of them heading into the season, based on the fact they finished dead last year. There are question marks, but all that said, I think they improved their team more than anyone in the country, except for LSU, who just, built the super team. But beyond that, what Mississippi State did in the transfer portal, through the JUCO transfer market, and then the freshmen that they brought in, we had them as a top 5 freshman class and a top 5 transfer class. It's really, really strong, and it's a different team. And so, the coaches don't know that yet in their league. They haven't seen Mississippi State. I have seen Mississippi State. I like their talent a lot, but it's still bold to pick them higher than maybe 4th, given all the other teams that are just more established. But that said, there's real talent here. I think it's going to be an explosive lineup. You've got to buy in on some guys like Slade Alford, being the big breakout guy that they expect. Colton Ledbetter, the center fielder they got from Samford. I'm all in on this guy. I think he's a true 5-tool talent. I think he'd be a first-round pick. He really performed at a high level last year at the mid-major ranks, and the MVP up there in the New England Collegiate League last summer. And I was up there for the All-Star game, and he just put on a show. He just leapt off the field. So dynamic talent. So they brought in some real stars, and then just loaded up with arm strength on the mound. And really the question mark for Mississippi State is, how is that arm strength going to translate? You've got Cade Smith, who you feel like you can trust to top the rotation, and then you got a lot of question marks. Is this the year for Parker Stinnett and Casey Hunt to put it all together? We know that the stuff is really, really good, and I think Stinnett's got one of the better breaking balls you'll see in the SEC, and I can't figure out why he hasn't been better yet in his career. And Casey Hunt, it's 4 real pitches. This guy could be a big leaguer. Even if he, never has a productive college career, he could figure it out down the road because it's a real talent. So there's a number of guys like that, where it's like Aaron Nixon, they brought in from Texas. He was an All-American heading into last season, a first-team preseason All-American. And I think he finished with like a 5 ERA, So it's like, can this guy bounce back and be the guy he was 2 years ago? They've got some of those question marks, but the upside is really exciting.
Lot on the line for Foxhall, because I think there's some question marks with him within the Mississippi State fan base. You just dropped, why hasn't Stinnett been better? And obviously some of that falls on him. Some people would say that falls on Foxhall. We're visiting with Aaron Fitt, national college baseball writer, D1 Baseball. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Would you describe the gap, in your opinion, between Mississippi State being picked 7th and Ole Miss being picked, well, in your case, 6th, but kind of describe the gap between the 6th and 7th team in the SEC West and the 3rd and 4th team? And I'm kind of asking you to describe the gap between Mississippi State and Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's a great question because it's not as big as you probably would think. I mean, Ole Miss being ranked in the top 5 in our top 25, and Mississippi State being picked 6th in the division, you'd think there's a huge gap here, but I don't think there really is. I mean, one difference is Ole Miss has a legitimate ace at the top, Hunter Elliott, a guy who's established himself in the College World Series as one of the best big game pitchers in the country. That's a big difference to have that. And then I just think some of the arms in the bullpen, even after they lost Josh Mallitz, and I think our rankings, I believe, came out before that news. So, we might have docked him a spot or two if we had known that. But even without him, I mean, between Mason Nichols and Jack Doherty and, some of the other big arms they've got back there, but especially those two guys, you've got some real proven commodities that you can lean on in your bullpen. And, and they're just, I think Ole Miss is so good up the middle with Calvin Harris. I'm really in on this guy. I know that he hadn't had a chance to catch because Hayden Dunhurst was there, but Harris is going to be a star. I think he's got a chance to be. Wouldn't surprise me if he winds up being the best catcher in the country this year as far as offense and defense. I think he's the real deal who's just waited for his opportunity and now he's got it. So you put him there with Peyton Chatinier and Jacob Gonzalez, might be the best middle infield in the country. And then you bring in Ethan Groff from Tulane, who hit over 400 last year, and it's just like Mississippi State, I think they're gonna score a lot of runs. And I know they lost firepower. People probably would expect they would take a step back without Tim Elko and Kevin Graham and these guys and bench. But I still think there's a lot here. That was the main thing I walked away from this fall. I went in there to see their Fall World Series. I said, hey, you know what? I don't think they are going to take a step back offensively. I mean, especially if Kemp Alderman has the kind of year that they're expecting. They think this guy could be a superstar. I mean, he was just a force of nature all fall. He's a monster, power hitter, and I think that'll translate this year.
All right, Aaron Fitt joining us on the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. He really likes Ole Miss, and it sounds like he likes Mississippi State. He did mention Hunter Elliott, Jacob Gonzalez. I mean, those are two absolute dudes. Dakota Jordan with Mississippi State. What have you heard about him, or what have you seen with your own eyes?
Yeah, he's exciting. It feels like a lazy comparison, but I don't think it is. He looks, he's got a little bit of Bo Jackson to him. I mean, it's that kind of explosive athlete. And like Bo, I think he's a former football running back. He's just got that kind of compact running back's build, just powerful, like the guy that just explodes through the baseball and also can really fly, and he can run in the outfield. It's just the whole thing. I think he's got a chance to be a big star. It's just a matter of how polished he is at this point. And we'll find out, for a freshman in the SEC, can you handle that caliber of pitching? Always a question mark, but the early reports have been pretty good. So I think he's going to start right away, even though they've got pretty crowded outfield picture out there. There's plenty of competition for jobs, but I expect he'll be in that mix just because he's just too talented to deny.
When you talk to the MSU staff, are they confident or concerned?
I think they are confident, but they're also, I think they felt a little snake bit. I mean, after what happened last year. So I think they're cautiously optimistic. I know some of those guys pretty well. I know all those guys pretty well. This is one of my favorite coaching staffs in the country. They're just awesome guys. And I know that a couple of them were really, they had some sleepless nights after what happened last year. And it was just, it hit those guys really hard, and to their credit, they went out there and got after it. And like I said, brought in some of the best newcomers in the country. But I think they're cautious about not projecting too much confidence. But I do think they're, behind the scenes, they know they're a lot better, and there's no question. And hey, last year was a perfect storm with injuries and everything, and just a couple of things that just didn't click. It felt like kind of a fluke. I mean, this program had been in 4 straight super regionals or something like that. I mean, they had been pretty darn good for a while, and sometimes that happens. You just have one of those bumps in the road. I suspect they'll bounce back pretty strong.
He is Aaron Fitt, and they do a great job covering the sport that we are all over here just in a week or so, as this state is baseball crazy with Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Southern Miss, Delta State, and so on. And, of course, we're surrounded with those Tigers and Razorbacks and all the other teams. He is Aaron Fitt, D1 Baseball, on the Out of Bounds Show and the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. All right, Aaron Fitt. Mike Bianco. I have covered Mike since 2003. And, I remember what Ole Miss baseball was or wasn't growing up. And nobody cared. Nobody went to the park and so on. And then he, he built it. And then all they did is win, but he came up short time and time again. Aaron, he was damn near fired late March, early April, according to our listeners and our text line and everything else. And then we have this remarkable run and remarkable turnaround. And now Bianco, 20 years in, gets a national title. Have you ever witnessed or experienced anything like what happened last year with Ole Miss baseball?
We've seen teams make that kind of run where they were left for dead. Virginia, a few years ago. Now the difference is Brian O'Connor wasn't on the hot seat, and you're right. There's no way to dance around it. Mike doesn't like talking about it. Why would he? It's uncomfortable. But everyone knows he was on his seat was pretty hot. In 2015 when Virginia won it all, they were the last team in the field of 64, just about. They were left for dead. I remember sitting. I think it was the final weekend of their regular season. They're in Chapel Hill, and they weren't going to, they weren't even going to make the ACC tournament. And their SID is making plans for what he's going to do during regional weekend. Literally planning his vacation.
He's like, I'm going to the beach.
Yeah, no, seriously. And they kind of just got hot. They swept that series. They ran through the conference tournament, and then you look up and they win it all. So we've seen those kind of things before, but the Bianco thing in the background, especially with, like you said, the fact he'd been there for 2 decades and built this really, really great program, consistent winner. I think that's the hardest thing to do. It's one thing to catch lightning in a bottle and win it all. That's just kind of almost luck of the draw. It's just like there's a reason the number 1 national seed hasn't won it all since 1999. It's just the best team doesn't usually win it all. It's just the hottest team and the team that just kind of gets the breaks and has the mojo and all that stuff that you can't quantify. I think if you're a consistent winner, if you're regularly hosting regionals and winning regionals, yeah, you'd like to see them break through to Omaha a few more times. They were so close. And how many super regional Game 3 losses did they have? 5 or something. It was, they were right there. We're talking about one game being the difference between a season being quantified as a success or a failure. I don't think that's fair. I think, the season is 60, 70, 80 games long.
Right.
Those are the ones that should matter.
Right. Aaron Fitt doing a great job, D1 Baseball. He joins us on the Out of Bounds Show. Regardless of where these two teams are ranked, insane high expectations in Oxford and Starkville. And the parks will be packed, and we all know the drill. And then, of course, the Mardi Gras of college baseball is in Starkville, foul pole to foul pole, and nobody cooks or does it better than they do. I do think that there is some pressure. He's not on the hot seat, but there is some pressure on Lamonis and Gautreaux and Foxhall. All right, Aaron. So you mentioned LSU and the super team and all the money they spent in NIL, and Jay Johnson's a hell of a coach anyway. Look what he did at Arizona and I think Nevada. I remember him coming in and ripping the heart out of Mississippi State in 2016 Super Regional. I was there for that. Mangum still believes that was the best team he played on, and he joined us last Friday in studio before hooking up with the Marlins over the weekend. But will you describe the gap between LSU and the second best team in the SEC West, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's there is definitely a gap. Just because their talent is so overwhelming, and really it's just there's no weakness. The only question with LSU is how are all these big name newcomers going to gel? The chemistry question. How many times have you seen the Lakers put together some super team and it just doesn't work, or whatever? But LSU with between Paul Skeens and Ty Floyd and Thatcher Hurd and Grant Taylor and Christian Little, it's like you've got 5 guys who could all be Friday night starters for 95% of the teams in the country. It's like that's the difference. It's just, in my opinion, it's the pitching. And yeah, they've got Dylan Cruz, who's probably the best player in the country, and you've got Some other Tommy White, who was in some publications, I think had him as the National Freshman of the Year last year. He's one of the best power hitters in the country. Like, you've got some star power in the lineup too, Trey Morgan. But I mean, for me, the real separator is the pitching, and Tennessee's right there with them as far as pitching now. Tennessee might have even a better rotation, but they don't have the kind of offense LSU has. So it's just like this is the one team that's got it all, and so yeah, there's a gap. But that said, it's not an insurmountable gap. I mean, there's 4 really good teams right there behind them. Really 6 really good teams right there behind them in the SEC West. Because Auburn, I mean, I hate to have Auburn picked last in the division, like coming off 2 College World Series in the last 3 years. And there's plenty to like about their team too. If you told me that they were going to sneak up in the league and finish 3rd or something, I'd be okay. Yeah, I could see that. So, I mean, there's just that division's a meat grinder. But that said, I just feel like LSU is built to withstand that, and we'll see how that goes. But on paper, I mean, the talent is insane.
Okay. What about when you look at Schlossnagle? I got a minute here. Schlossnagle and A&M, do they have again, you got to get the breaks, like you mentioned with Ole Miss and Mississippi State the last 2 years, among other champions. Does Schlossnagle have a national championship type roster in College Station, Aaron?
I guess maybe. I mean, we've got them ranked in the top 10. I don't know, they're 5 or 6, wherever they are, but there's a lot back from that team that was very offensive last year, and I just think they're so well coached, and they've got some of these older guys that just wear you down with these long at bats. I mean, their games. I thought their games were tough to watch last year because they're all 4.5 hours because they're fouling off 8 pitches every at bat. And that's a credit to them. It's like watching the Yankees and the Red Sox every night. They're just marathon games. They wear you down, and it's tough to beat that team. And it's a question for me is, how does the pitching hold up? You've got some talent there, like some of these other teams we've talked about. But Nathan Detmer's got electric stuff, but he had a 5 ERA last year. Can he make that next step and be a true number 1 guy? And then you're relying on a Chris Cortez who can throw 100 miles an hour, but again, can he throw enough strikes? You've got a Troy Wansing they brought in from Purdue, left-hander. They like him a lot. Our guys who've seen him like him a lot. But it's a step up in competition from the Big Ten, the SEC, and he didn't exactly put up great numbers at Purdue. So you're kind of relying on some guys that you're just trusting that Nate Yeskie is going to figure it out. And I think Yeskie is as good a pitching coach as there is in the country. And so I believe in that guy.
He's a baller.
Yeah, I mean.
All right, let me ask you this,
Omaha.
Aaron. Yeah. Aaron Fitt, D1 Baseball. If you had to make a wager, all right, so you feel like Mississippi State can find their way into regional as a 2 or 3 seed on the road, correct?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. If I told you they would eventually make a super regional, would you be shocked, or would you say I could see that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to pick them as my Omaha sleeper this year. It just feels a little bit weak to pick a team that won it all 2 years ago as an Omaha sleeper. But I think that people are sleeping on them. They were picked to finish last in their division by the coaches, so I think they qualify. And for me, yeah, I think it's an Omaha caliber roster as far as pure talent is concerned. It just doesn't have the track record right now on the mound. And if that comes together, then yeah, sure, they could be in a super. They could be in Omaha.
Okay. All right. Mike Bianco, Chris Lemos. All right. One more. I know you got to go at 8:50. Tony Vitello. Have you ever seen anyone that's kind of as cocky and flamboyant and a lot of these guys are very reserved during games, right? I mean, I know they'll get after the ump. I mean, Lemonis has got some blank U in him, and so does Bianco. But they're not going to mix it up with an opposing coach. Butch Thompson's not going to do that I know. Maybe O'Sully Sullivan's got a little bit in it. But anyway, Tony Vitello, have you ever, wouldn't you say he's kind of the most aggressive, cocky coach we've had in the league in a while, or no?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's pretty clear. And that team last year took on his personality. They play with an edge, for better or for worse. And certainly it rubbed some people the wrong way at times. And, you're rounding the bases and flipping off the opposing team like Jordan Beck did in the postseason.
Hello.
It's not a good look. Not a good look.
Do you think I've got 30 seconds. Do you think he and Van Horn, do you think Vitello and Van Horn had a steak dinner together in the offseason?
Highly unlikely. That series is going to be very fascinating, and they play this year in the regular season. A lot of eyes on that one.
I love it.
It's going to be fun.
Aaron Fitt, y'all do a great job, man. D1 Baseball, at D1 Baseball on Twitter. And Aaron and the team absolutely crush it. And, of course, we're eating up with it as we will be discussing Bianco and Lemonis every single – here's where we are, Aaron. Our listeners freak out on a Tuesday or Wednesday midweek loss. It is literally the world's burning down, and I could do 3 hours on it if and when that happens. How about that?
I love it. My favorite college baseball state in the country. You guys are the best out there.
Thanks, Aaron Fitt. D1 Baseball right here on the Out of Bounds show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. He has Ole Miss slightly better than Mississippi State. He still likes the look, Hunter Elliott is a proven dude. We all know that. He's a number one. He was phenomenal as a freshman out of Tupelo. The kid's got filthy stuff. The list goes on and on about him. Jacob Gonzalez could go number 1, 3, or 5 in the MLB draft. Ole Miss still going to have to prove it, just like every team that's coming off the championship. Look at MSU last year, just totally falling apart. Some of it was bad luck. Some of it was on the coaches and the team. It can't be totally excused. Sorry. That's not where we go. You can do that. But having said that, it sounds like a whisker's worth, a fingernail's worth of difference between MSU and Ole Miss is kind of picked in the middle of the SEC West. So he still believes that MSU makes the postseason on the road, but he has them as top 5 transfer portal class and top 5 newcomer class. But how much in the grind of 30 SEC games, and hey, congratulations, Mississippi State, you pulled Tennessee again. In the grind of 30 SEC games, how much can you rely on the newcomers? Although you look at Ole Miss and Mississippi State, they've had freshmen come in and be out in the field and on the mound in big time contributors, including Hunter Elliott, who will go down as one of the best ever at Ole Miss, and Jake Mangum was a freshman phenom at Mississippi State. There have been others. Now, Dakota Jordan, this is going to be interesting.
Hello.
The Dakota Jordan thing is going to be to track that and see what's going on and what he can do. And if he doesn't get tripped up with that nasty stuff on especially Fridays, but maybe even Saturdays when they're throwing, when they're throwing 97 and then their off-speed stuff's 91 and then they've got one more coming behind it at 82. We'll see.
Here's a real question that I'd love to get your thoughts on the other side. If you're not going to be picked first, wouldn't you rather be picked last so you have a chip on your shoulder than be right in the middle?
Yeah.
I'd rather, if I'm Mississippi State, glad they picked you last,
You would have
right?
to believe Lemonis will leverage this.
You would, if you can't, that's a whole different discussion.
I would have started the meeting with, they think you're dog blank. Okay? And it doesn't smell good. The Out of Bounds show is brought to you by Raggio Mercantile Shop in Raymond, Mississippi. You got to check it out if you're, and for my Madison guys and Brandon guys, you got to drive down there. It's an experience. Raggio cut his teeth, became basically a celebrity because of this show. I'm just kidding, because he is an amazing world-class duck call maker, and then parlayed it into Raggio Mercantile Shop in Raymond, Mississippi. Hour number 3 coming up. Joseph Stodgel, Martin's, is going to cook some good food for us.